Welcome everyone to the second diversity dialogue of our fiscal year 22 academic year. As I've committed to doing, the first thing that I will share is Harvard's land and people acknowledgement. Harvard University is located on the traditional and ancestral land of the Massachusetts, the original inhabitants of what is now known as Boston and Cambridge. We pay respect to the people of the Massachusetts tribe, past and present, and honor the land itself, which remains sacred to the Massachusetts people. This land and people acknowledgement was prepared by the Harvard University Native American program, and I encourage you to share it at your meetings as well. Now, February is Black History Month, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge those who were enslaved at Harvard. So we honor today the memory of Titus, Venus, Bilhah, and Juba, who lived and worked at Harvard as enslaved persons during the presidencies of Benjamin Wadsworth and Edward Holyoke in the 1700s. This acknowledgement is excerpted from a plaque that was placed on Wadsworth House by former Harvard President Drew Faust and the late US Representative John Lewis in the spring of 2016. At that time, President Faust said, "The past never dies or disappears. It continues to shape us in ways we should not try to erase or ignore." And oh, how truly those words ring true today. Now, we have a great session planned for you. And before we get started, I just want to give you a couple of guidelines. We ask that you remain on mute unless you're speaking. If you have questions, you feel free to place them in the chat. We've reserved time for a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. If there is something that is particularly germane to a specific part of the conversation, we may, however, share it in real time. I have committed to offering a self-care moment during each dialogue, and our self-care moment today will be shared during the presentation by Mary Frances Winters. So I hope this makes good sense to everyone. So as I shared at our last dialogue, our theme for this year is talking loud and saying something, progressing from moment to movement. The content that we're presenting is deep and rich, and we hope it provides you with new knowledge that will help you and will last as you engage in this work of inclusion, and that it will last far beyond today's session, helping to take these activities from being just one moment in time to a movement. Now, today we're going to learn about Black fatigue. And in preparation for today, I Googled, what are the types of fatigue? And what I found was there's social fatigue, emotional fatigue, physical fatigue, pain fatigue, mental fatigue, and chronic illness fatigue. Those were the primary types of fatigue that were listed. And you know what? I wasn't surprised not to see Black fatigue there, because in my estimation, all of those things are a part of Black fatigue. Now, I'm sure that some of us have heard of this syndrome. I'm sure some of us are living with this syndrome. And I'm also sure that there are even more of us who have probably not heard of or thought a lot about this syndrome before you received an invite to today's dialogue. Now, please don't take this as a judgment, because it's not. It's just an acknowledgement of where we are. So I'm pleased to welcome you here today, and I'm pleased that you are taking time to learn more about Black fatigue from a premier expert in the field, Mary Frances Winters. And you'll hear more about her in a bit. But right now, I also have the pleasure of introducing to you our Dean for Administration and Finance, Scott Jordan. Scott joined us in August of 2021 from the University of Connecticut, and he's been charged by FAS Dean Claudine Gay to help us ensure a vibrant, diverse, and inclusive culture and workforce within the FAS. I believe his presence here today supports his commitment to this. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Scott, who will give remarks and then introduce our guest speaker. Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andrea. So good to be here today. And before I get started, I want to acknowledge you and your work here at Harvard and in the FAS. You'll hear from me a little bit, and over the course of the next year or two about all the new great work that we're doing with regard to diversity. But you've been here at it for a long time, and you have to acknowledge the great work that has been done so far. For 13 years, Andrea Kelton Harris has brought diversity dialogues to Harvard and to FAS, and really led the university. I hear from all over the university, all schools, about these diversity dialogues, and really we have to appreciate the work that you do and acknowledge your leadership in this space. So I want to shout out to you first, and give a moment for folks in the chat or in person to applaud your work.
Oh,
thank
you so much, Scott. Thank you so much.
As Andrea said in her introduction, my name is Scott Jordan. I'm still the relatively new Dean for Administration and Finance. I've been here 6 months now, so I have to add relatively and not just play the new card all day. Came here from University of Connecticut. I was executive vice president there and had a large portfolio of operational and financial units, including procurement, human resources, and public safety. At UConn, we had a full-fledged police department, fire department, emergency management, and ambulance service that reported to me. And while those are varied units, it is one of the most important and rewarding pieces of work that I could do there was to bring equity, diversity, and inclusion to that work. And we did in many ways, big and small. We ran a nationally recognized supplier diversity program in procurement. And, Connecticut's a small state, Massachusetts is a small state. Important to keep as much work as we can local, and to keep as much work as we can with small businesses and members of diverse communities, including women and minority-owned businesses. We increased diversity among senior leadership while I was at UConn. And, I can't take full credit. We had a strong team that was committed to the work, appointed the university's first cabinet level vice president and chief diversity officer. And in my leadership of public safety was at the forefront of our engagement with the community around the Black Lives Matter movement. And I can say that was not just rewarding, but some of the hardest work that we had to do. As the leader of a police department, acknowledging the work that police do every day, while also acknowledging the challenges that the community brings and that police officers have in that space, and listening to our students and listening to our community. And we made great progress. We had a brave chief at the time who worked with us and actually volunteered to work with the folks that manage student mental health. We didn't call it defund, but we moved resources from enforcement to mental health, and we moved resources to folks that could de-escalate better and to do a much better job of engagement with community. And we did it without a lot of fanfare. It was an everyday work with the community, with our students, with our police officers. And I think that's the way we have to do this work every day in ways big and small. I am committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Belonging is a welcome word for me, coming from UConn to Harvard and hearing that word used at Harvard. We didn't include it at UConn, but it's so important to what we're trying to accomplish. I'm committed not just institutionally. We talk about, as an administrator, and I went to the Kennedy School. We talk about creating programs. We talk about measuring our success, doing analytics. But it's also personal work. It's work that we all need to do, and that I came to, fairly late in my life. I was a public policy person. I want to create a program and measure our success. But in recent years, in what feels like a hostile national environment, we've got to bring our hearts to it too, with humility and with openness, and to listen to the experiences of all of our fellow members of community. And that's what I want to bring today to this work. So in that spirit, I want to say I am so pleased that we are all here today to talk about Black fatigue, how it impacts Black people and ways we can achieve sustainable anti-racist impact at Harvard and in the world. Harvard, we are all here, faculty, staff, students at Harvard, because Harvard is a world leader, and we want to be part of world change. We bring the best and brightest, and I include our staff in that best and brightest in this space. And it's not just to build community here, but again, to lead and educate future world leaders. And we can't educate future world leaders to have positive world impact without first creating a culture and an environment here that is where students and faculty and staff can work and learn and be without fear or judgment, where we communicate with each other across cultures and across all forms of divide that we may feel with one another, and that nobody feels like an imposter or like they don't belong, that we are here together, and that we have an obligation to be together and to work together in good faith and with humility. So it's with dialogues like this that we advance the work. And I couldn't be happier today to recognize and to introduce Mary Frances Winters, who will explore with us today this concept, this issue, this problem of Black fatigue. Mary Frances Winters is founder and CEO of the Winters Group, a global organization development and diversity and inclusion consulting firm. She's written 6 books, so that maybe we can have 5 more of these dialogues, Mary Frances, after, including what we're going to talk about today, Black fatigue, how racism erodes the mind, body, and spirit. She believes diversity and inclusion work is her passion and calling. For the past 3 decades, she has impacted hundreds of organizations and thousands of individuals with her thought-provoking message and her approach to diversity and inclusion. She was named a diversity pioneer by Profiles in Diversity Journal in August 2007. She received the Winds of Change Award from the Forum on Workplace Inclusion in 2016. And in November 2019, she was named by Forbes as one of 10 trailblazers in diversity and inclusion. And she was also a torchbearer in the Olympics. So that's couldn't be more timely. That's pretty cool. And has previously been recognized for her contributions to women and to the community. So please welcome Mary Frances Winters to Harvard. Welcome, Mary Frances.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that very, very warm welcome. I am humbled. I am honored. It's just such a pleasure to be here with you all today. When I got the call or the ask to present at Harvard, I'm like, oh my gosh, Harvard. I do have a little history with Harvard. My son is a 1999 graduate of FAS, and he went on to Duke and Princeton, and he's now a professor at Duke University. So very proud of him. When he got that acceptance letter so many years ago, I'm a first-generation college graduate, so I cannot tell you how proud I was, and his dad as well, that our son had been accepted to Harvard, and he had a great experience there as well. So thank you. It's just so good to be here today. These are difficult times for all of us. They're difficult times for so many reasons right now, not to mention the pandemic and, the racial unrest and the political polarization. And I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. And we recognize that it is so important for us to, for self-care, to take care of ourselves and to be well and to try to be well. And the content that I'm going to present this morning is pretty heavy. It really is. I mean, Black fatigue is not necessarily, a happy topic. So before we get into it, I would like to ask us all to just take a moment to take a deep breath. I'm going to play some quiet music, and I just want you to be with yourself, see yourself as worthy, know that you are worthy, know that you are a unique emanation of spirit, and that in this day is going to be a day that you can choose to find the joy in the day, even in the face of all that's going on. So we're just going to take a moment to do that before I get started.
Please let me feel inner peace from my center at the center of me. Please let me feel inner peace from my center at the center of me. Please let me feel inner peace from my center at the center of me. Please let me feel inner peace from my center at the center of me. My heart is open, I am aware, in me's a knowing love, 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 my heart is open, I am aware, in me's a knowing love, 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 love. Ooh.
So please let me feel inner peace. I hope our hearts are open. I want us all to just take a deep breath now. And that said, I'm going to get into helping us understand Black fatigue. Trigger warning, some of this may be difficult for you to hear. I invite you to engage to the extent that you can. I invite you to definitely take care of your own spirit and your own heart. So I'm going to play a video, which for me summarizes what Black fatigue is.
I'm not okay. I'm not okay today. I want to give everybody permission to say they are not okay. And I want to give the Black community permission to say you're not okay. I am tired. I'm tired. I have yet to watch the video of Ahmaud Arbery. It's too much. I have not watched the video of George Floyd. It's too much. For those who think falsely calling 911 on a Black person have other fish to fry, talk to George's family. Talk to Tamir Rice's family. Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, talk to their families and say if you have other fish to fry. Black people in general have to go to work the next day and pretend like they are all right. Black women in particular cannot say anything or they're viewed as angry Black women. That woman was so comfortable in her privilege that even being recorded, she felt like nothing would happen to her. And I saw as her false anger escalated toward the end, when she realized she had to put more emphasis on an African-American person attacking her to get the response that she needed. I am not okay today. I really am not. We are trying to deal with tens of thousands of people dying from COVID, disproportionately in the Black and brown community. There is no bigger fish to fry than the institution of racism and bigotry that is pervasive in every damn institution across this city, state, and this country, period. And to have the NYPD continually sit up there and say they don't have any discriminatory institution that they deal with, that nothing about them has to do with discrimination or racism. To then say we have bigger fish to fry, how dare you? How dare you? People are dying. They're dying.
So he's a New York City advocate. And as I was writing the book, I saw this and I said that this, from my perspective, is just epitomizes what Black fatigue feels like. And I do have a definition of Black fatigue, from the book. It's repeated variations of stress caused by centuries of racism, resulting in extreme exhaustion, causing physical, mental, and spiritual maladies that are passed down from generation to generation. And I'm going to talk in a little bit about it being passed down from generation to generation. And some of you who may be in clinical fields or in health-related fields may know about what I'm talking about. So we're starting there. And again, I know that this is heavy, but I think it's really necessary to understand the depth of the fatigue. The reason that I wrote the book was actually younger people, millennials and Gen Zs. I was in organizations. So my company goes into organizations. We do training, we do strategy work, we do focus groups with different diversity dimensions. We do focus groups with Black employees, with Native employees, with other groups. And in talking with Black employees, they would often say, from company to company to company, we're tired, we're exhausted from having to continue to talk about the inequities. And I kind of took that at first, a tongue in cheek, and I said, you're 25 years old. How are you tired already? And they look at me like, you might be an older person and we're supposed to respect, but we know that we're exhausted. So I got to thinking about it. I'm thinking, during the civil rights era of the 60s, were the civil rights leaders fatigued? So I had an opportunity through another colleague to talk to Andrew Young. And he said, no, he said, we didn't talk about fatigue. He said, we probably were fatigued. He said, but Dr. King would say, look, you got a headache? That's okay. Just get on that plane. And because we've got, we're fighting. And of course, Dr. King did talk about his fatigue, in the struggle. But I think today, what's different today, what I'm seeing differently with this generation, with the younger generation, is the willingness to say, we're not going to accept that fatigue as our, as what is normal, as what we have to accept to survive and thrive in the world. We're going to call it out, right? And we're going to insist on boundaries. We're going to insist on focusing on our own well-being. So back in 1963, James Baldwin said, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all of the time. And that rage, of course, is a part of Black fatigue and is not good, for our health. You saw that rage and anger with the gentleman who was just on the video. He mentioned the angry Black woman syndrome. And, we used to talk about the angry Black woman and, well, gee, how do I show up, not angry? How do I show up? And again, what I'm hearing from, some of my younger colleagues is that we're angry. And let's talk about why we're angry, rather than trying to suppress that anger. So I'm seeing a different way of approaching what's going on in the world relative to racism. I mean, it's been around for obviously over 400 years, but I think this movement, I was wondering if it was going to be a moment or a movement. I think this movement and the activists today are approaching it from the perspective is, this is not our work for Black people. This is not our work. This is society's work. This is collective. There's got to be a collective accountability, because racism, whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you identify as Asian, whether you identify as any other ethnicity, whatever ethnicity you might identify, it impacts you as well. It impacts all of us. And so I wrote this book and I had to think about my own Black fatigue. And so I say I was hard pressed to name it. It was an underlying syndrome of sorts that permeates my very being. It operates like a dull, droning sound, always present, that most of the time is drowned out by the higher pitches of my optimism and hope. I now know it to be Black fatigue because I didn't think about it. I just thought about, this is my mission, this is my calling to do this work. as an undergraduate at the University of Rochester, I was an activist, and we actually occupied the administration building for some racist things that were going on. That was back in the early 70s. And so I've always had that in my spirit, because I live and see what those inequities are. But I wouldn't have called it Black fatigue. And I wouldn't have even allowed myself to think that I could be fatigued. I wouldn't even know. And I wouldn't even know to correlate some of what my physical and emotional symptoms were. I would not have necessarily correlated it with Black fatigue, even though throughout my life, I know that there were many things that were related to race. I talk about my son, who is, who was a graduate of Harvard. He was the valedictorian of an all-male Jesuit high school. And in his valedictorian speech back in 1996, he talked about the racism that he endured at that school and what he saw on the wall, the graffiti and all of those kinds of things. And he talked about it in his valedictorian speech, which we were all kind of surprised about, but he's quite an activist as well. And so I see that passing down from generation to generation. My daughter, who has 4 degrees, she's an electrical engineer. She has an MBA and a master's in information systems, and I can't remember what the 4th one is. And she's the vice president of the Winters Group now. But as an engineer, as a young Black woman engineer, she would come home crying all the time about the micro inequities that she faced. So, it was like, I don't know how I cannot be a part of this movement. I don't know how I just have to be. When she was 11, she wanted a dog. Nobody else in the family wanted a dog. But anyway, she wanted a dog. So we got her this little Shih Tzu because it was a small dog, does small things. So he couldn't, the dog had just been born, the puppy had just been born. So we had to wait the 6 weeks to get the dog. And in the ensuing weeks, we got a call saying we couldn't have the dog anymore. And I investigated, long story short, I investigated, and the breeder had a partner breeder, and the partner found out that we were Black and said that she wouldn't sell the dog to a Black family. How do you tell an 11-year-old that she can't have a dog because she's Black? So again, just throughout my life, and I write about this in the book too, I write about these experiences, in the book, because I would have hoped that by the time my children were of age, that we would have gotten to a different place. So yes, I experienced Black fatigue. But I want to talk about racism from the perspective of it being a system, right? Because when, that's a really triggering word, right? You call somebody a racist. Oh, I'm not a racist. I mean, that's like, calling somebody a racist today would be like calling somebody a pedophile or some horrible thing. I'm not a racist. And so I think if we continue to look at it from an individual interpersonal level, we're not going to get anywhere. And what we really need to do is understand the systems of structuring and assigning value based on how somebody looks that unfairly disadvantages some, and advantages others. I don't want to get political, but we're seeing how this is playing out with the Supreme Court, nominee. And so if we've had a history of structuring a system that would have precluded a Black woman from being a nominee, equity and justice would say, we need to fix that. We need to fix that system. But we know that it's not without controversy. And so if we look at our history, and I am not going to give you all a history lesson. Some of you probably know the history better than I do, but I think this slide just show, in a very, very small slide here, but from 1619 to 2020, what has happened. And I'm just going to point out, just a couple of things, so voting rights, right? The 15th Amendment. And so why did we have to have a 1965 Voting Rights Act? Why do we need a 2020 Voting Rights Act? Why do we need to continue to correct the system where there are laws that say that everyone has the right to vote? So why do we now need additional laws? When we think about things like the war on drugs and how that all played out in the 80s and the 90s, and now, and it was looked at as a criminal act. And today, because so many more people are addicted to opioids and different things, it's seen as a mental health issue. So you see the system, and that's what I want to point out, how the system continues to perpetuate the inequities. So that's at a systems level. But I told you my personal story so that you can see how does that play out on a day-to-day basis. And when the gentleman in the video said, I cannot watch the video of Ahmaud Arbery. I cannot watch. When my friends will tell me, well, there's something on, about the history of racism. And a lot of times I say, I can't watch it. And that's why I gave you all the trigger warning earlier. And like he said, it's just too much. It's just too much. That's Black fatigue. It's just too much. So the other thing that I talk about in the book is this idea of then is now. And I mentioned that a little bit with the voting rights. But when you look at any of the indicators, or many of the indicators, a lot of the socioeconomic indicators, if you look at any other point in time, like 1960 to 2015, or whatever other 2 points you pick, you'll see that the statistics have not really changed that much. For example, in 1975, 43% of Black people own their own homes. In 2015, that number was still 43%. If we look at net wealth, if we look at the wealth gap, you look at 1960 to 2015 or 2016, whatever points in time you look at, Black net wealth has not increased, and it's the lowest of any group. And so then is now. And so we have all of this data that shows us, and again, this is not going to be a data dump on you today, but the point is that when we look at various indicators, for example, Black women have significantly higher mortality rates, regardless of socioeconomic status and regardless of level of education. We know about the disproportionate impacts of COVID. And these are complex issues. And again, in a short period of time, I can't go into all of the compounding and the interlocking issues related to why this is happening. But let me just pause to say this, that I was shocked when 2 years ago, when the George Floyd murder happened, and many of these organizations were our clients, and their CEOs came out to say, gee, we didn't know racism was still that bad. Oh, we're going to make a commitment now. We're going to commit to anti-Black racism. We're going to commit to doing training. We're going to commit to giving Juneteenth as a holiday. We're going to commit to learning more about the history. And what was really shocking for me was like, where have you been? If it took that incident for us to know that these things were still happening. The same thing with the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19. We heard, oh, gee, I didn't know that there were these disparate, disproportionate health outcomes. So again, it's frustrating, and that exacerbates the Black fatigue for Black people. It's like, you're saying you don't know? You're saying you didn't know? How could that be? So just to help you understand how this just gets carried from generation to generation. So I've been doing this for 3 decades now, right? Over a couple of generations. And the same issues that we talked about in 1984 and 1985 when I first started my company, we're still talking about that today. Lack of representation. I serve as a trustee at my alma mater, the University of Rochester, and I served as a trustee from 87 to 97. I was actually the first African-American trustee, and I served as a voting trustee and then became a life trustee. And now they've asked me to go back on the board as a voting trustee. So I just went back this last year as a voting trustee. The same things that we were talking about in 1987, we're talking about today. Lack of Black faculty, right? Retention of students of color. So those are the same kinds of things. And why don't we fix them? And because we try to fix these things with programs, rather than getting at the system. We also, I think, try to fix some of these issues by focusing on, quote, the victims, by focusing on the marginalized group. How do they need to change, rather than turning it around and looking at what needs to change in the system. And I'll just give an example of that, a program, perhaps a mentoring program, because a mentoring program is saying, basically, how can we help you to fit into our status quo? But I got off track just a little bit, so let me get back on track. So then is now, Black Americans receive 36% fewer callbacks than equally qualified white applicants. This study was actually a longitudinal study and a meta-study which looked at data over the course of about 30 years. And it was done by researchers not only in the United States, but in Europe as well. And they correlated everything and did and looked at it from holding constant all of the kinds of things that you would want to hold constant to make sure that your outcome is as accurate as possible. And this is what they found out, 36% fewer callbacks. And of course, there's the famous MIT study, which showed that Black sounding names receive fewer callbacks. This study I'm referencing is a different one. Black people are paid on average 28% less than white employees with the same positions. And so if you look at faculty, in general, Black faculty, Black women, female women faculty in particular are paid less than their male counterparts. And so, we're continuing to perpetuate. Blacks are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police, more likely to be stopped, arrested, charged, and absolutely serve longer sentences. Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, which made it illegal to have segregated public schools. The schools are more segregated today than they were in 1954. Actually, after that landmark case, Virginia decided to actually close their public schools and send all the white children to private schools. And so the resistance to change, the resistance to equality, the resistance to changing systems, as we're seeing today, is really great. Black children more likely to be disciplined and suspended. So Black children make up 19% of the preschool population, and they make up 46% of the suspensions from preschool. Another little tidbit about my son: when he was 3, he was asked to leave Montessori school because he didn't string his beads the Montessori way. So I didn't think there was a way, but anyway, so when I see these statistics, I can see myself and see situations in my own family. The requirements that disproportionately target Black people and people of color, not just people of color, but that's what we're talking about today in terms of the voter, what's going on right now with voter suppression. And so, we have to just acknowledge that racism is a very, very serious problem. The levels of racism, as I've mentioned, can be internalized racism. So internalized racism is when I begin to believe the stereotypes about my group, about me, right? And I internalize that, and that impacts my ability to reach my full potential. The interpersonal, obviously, somebody, and you're in a relationship with, is racist. Obviously, the institutional, what's going on in various institutions, and then the structural, that's the deepest level. And so I think if we focus more on the institutional and the structural, we're going to make progress. Not that we shouldn't focus on the other areas, but we haven't put enough attention there. And we have to really recognize that it is about equity. It's not about equality. Equality, speaks to treating everyone the same. Many of you have probably seen this visual before, where everybody gets the same box in the first one. In the second one, you've taken away the different supports that they need, so they're being treated equitably, but removing that systemic barrier so that nobody even needs a box anymore, right? So how do we do that? And that's the systems piece. How do we create a society where we remove those barriers so people don't need a box? Internalized racism plays out in a lot of different ways. Colorism, there was the brown paper bag test, back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and even today, the darker you are, the more discriminated you are against. There have been studies that show actually that darker skinned Black men make less money for the same type of job than lighter skinned Black men. They also did a study with Latino men and found the same thing, darker skinned Latino men. So colorism is real. Stereotypes and generalizations that we make, that we believe, the angry Black woman syndrome, the model minority for Asian Americans, and how if you internalize that I'm supposed to be good, in math, and what does that do? So that's really key. And how do we disrupt that? Unlearning these one-sided narratives of history by centering the voices and experiences of Black, Indigenous people of color. And so, we have to listen more, the qualitative and not just the quantitative. The qualitative, helps us to understand why we have the quantitative. Interpersonal, the microaggressions that happen, oh, you're so articulate, or how do you get your hair like that? Can I touch your hair? Or that's not really professional. The minimization, oh, we're all just the same. I'm colorblind, I don't see color. And then the implicit and explicit bias that plays out. We're all very familiar with the implicit, bias. We got to call it in and call it out. And we're afraid to do that. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but ask yourself, where can you use your power to combat racist rhetoric? Do you speak up when you're able to speak? When you hear something that's a little off, and we don't have to call people out first, let's call them in first. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I'm not sure I understood what you meant by that, because silence is complicity. Institutional racism, of course, redlining that we know about, and redlining still happens, folks. It still happens. The monuments and symbols, and many of those are coming down. Lack of representation in institutions. This is just widespread. It doesn't matter if you're a university, if you're a corporation, if you're a not-for-profit. We work with all of those kinds of organizations, and every single one of them has a representation issue, particularly at the top levels of the organization. And 38 years ago, when I started my business, there was a representation issue. And so how do we embed racial equity into our policies and practices across the organization? Not just HR policies, but all policies and practices. The structural, the criminal justice system, political suppression, we've already talked about. Think about environmental racism, food insecurity. Where do grocery stores build the stores? They don't build them in communities of color, and therefore, what does food insecurity, lead to, right? The health issues that it leads to, and all of those kinds of things. And again, don't have time to go into the detail, but it's really looking at the compounded, the structures that are in place and are interlocked that compound. One quick example: one of our clients is a not-for-profit housing organization in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they build affordable housing. We've been working with them for 3 or 4 years on their diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. And we were talking about how this phrase that Black men get locked up, Black women get locked out. So single mothers oftentimes, evicted. If you have an eviction on your record, it's very difficult to get another apartment. The other thing is if you have, a felony on your record as well. And so they said, this is an organization that is really very progressive about diversity, equity, inclusion. So they're looking at that system right now, that structure that they have in place, because they said, wow, we do have that policy. We look at the eviction record, but do you know why? Do you know what happened in that particular instance? So rather than just saying, oh, eviction, let's look at why. So that's how we can begin to change structures through those policies. So here's another issue. We have to recognize that we live in a racialized world. So when people say, I don't see color, I just see everybody the same, there's a lot of issues with that statement. I know people mean well when they say that. I absolutely do. I know people mean well when they say that. However, what it does is it minimizes that the person of color's identity, because that identity is likely important to them. I want you to see color. The other thing it does, it leaves out the white person without having to take any responsibility or accountability for what's going on, because I don't see it. So this is a study that Pew does every year. And they ask the question, do you think that race is core? Is race core to your identity? 75% of Black people say that it is core to their identity. 56% of Asians say that it's core to their race is core to their identity. Latinx say that their race ethnicity is core to their identity, 59%. Only 15% of white people say that race is core to their identity. This is not an indictment. This is not to make anybody feel badly. My only point here is that if we don't recognize that we live in a racialized world, we all swim in the water. We swim in the water of racism, because that's what our country was founded on. I'm only talking US now. There's global context as well, but I'm just talking US for right now. And so if only 15% of white people say that their race is core to their identity, it's really difficult to have that conversation across race, because white people would continue to try to minimize it, right? And we see that play out in white fragility. We see that play out in, why are you still talking about race? Why are you calling the race card? We're just all the same. So it's really important to be able to have that conversation, to recognize the role that your race, ethnicity plays in who you are, how you're seen in the world, whether you think it's important or not, because we do live in a racialized world. So this video is I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes, and this video is going to perhaps help us to understand that a little bit more.
It's very uncomfortable to talk about race. It's not something. It's not something I do.
I am feeling apprehensive because I think there's a lot of reasons why I feel like I should be able to talk about race.
I don't want to say anything, you know, that would offend anyone.
It's a very touchy subject. It's still difficult, even if you feel like you're on the right side of it, to, to have a dialogue about it.
Especially for white people, because we don't want to see if the racism that we may be holding on to.
I don't know. Maybe I am racist. I certainly don't like to think that I am. And I think that's too because the perception, in this society, perception of a racist is a guy in a robe.
Now I understand that it's a system of advantages and disadvantages based on race. So as much as there's the disadvantage piece of it, there's the advantage piece of it, which is what I experience as a white person.
I want to bring up race, and I want to bring it up in a frame that helps my children think that there's no difference. But the mere fact that I might be bringing it up could suggest that there is a difference.
I remember asking a friend of my father's who's black why he was called black, because his skin was brown. And I've learned that lots of people that are white ask this question, and maybe they also received the answer that I got from my parents, which was like, oh my gosh, we're so sorry that she asked that, and it's just a term, like, move on.
One of my third grade students seemed pretty rocked after the Eric Garner case or death, and came up to me and said, why, when you were little, like, were you worried about this stuff too? And I knew what he was talking about before. I mean, I didn't say, what do you mean, what stuff? I didn't want to, play dumb. And I said, no, like, I didn't have to be, and that's not fair. And that was really hard because he just kind of sat there, and it honestly seemed like the first time that he had considered the fact that not everyone had to think about race all the time.
I know that I'm white, and I guess I'm part of that collection. But I don't think about being white. I don't.
I really did not know that I had a racial identity. I knew I was white. I had no idea what that meant, how that had shaped my outlook on life, how that had shaped my sense of optimism, sense of belonging, sense of safety, sense of feeling entitled to go help children that I thought were a part of a community that couldn't figure out how to help themselves.
I think that impulse, that kind of colorblindness impulse, comes mostly from white people. Like, I've never heard, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it comes from all people of all kinds, but I've heard it most from white people who are saying, like, let's do this as a way of getting past this racism thing. And I think in part it comes from a sense of shame and guilt about what racism has done, and kind of how racism was built by white people.
I don't want to be ashamed of being, and plus I'm a male. It's like every group out there can be pissed off at me because I'm white and a male. And that's a weird kind of burden that some people do feel, and I certainly feel it sometimes from people that I'm privileged, I get stuff that other people don't get.
I think we're all implicated in a racist system, and I play my part in it as a white person. So I do have individual responsibility and accountability. I mean, I'm part of the system, and I do things that both perpetuate it, and I try to certainly do things that challenge it.
I realize I've never said anything. When I've heard racist jokes, when I've heard racist comments, I've never said anything. I've never spoken up and said, hey, that's racist. Not once.
In my mind, I'm not involved in any conflict that involves race. I've only been the beneficiary of it. So to talk about it is I don't think I would sound very wise.
Being white means that I have the privilege to think that I'm not affected by racism. Or that I don't even have a race, because I have all these other things like a gender and a sexual orientation, and those are pretty neat, so I don't have a race. But I do, and I'm white.
Okay, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to have you do some breakout work. And I'm going to give you about 10 minutes in a breakout session to just talk with your group. What did you think? What did you feel? And what can you change? Those are the 3 questions. And we're going to put those questions in the chat so that you have them. And we're going to break you into groups magically. I don't exactly know how all that works, but we're going to magically break you all into groups for about 10 minutes. And so if you find that you're pretty quiet, we'd ask someone to, start the conversation and keep the conversation going. And we'll come back and see what you think. We'll have you put some things in chat. Maybe there are some other instructions.
Mary Frances, I'm opening the rooms right now, and Annie put the questions into the chat. Thank you.
Thank you. For coming. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for getting zoomed back in. My experience with this is that some of you probably were in mid-sentence, but you were zoomed in anyway, so the time flew by. Yeah, so in the chat, there wasn't enough time. I hear you. Maybe we can do some, maybe you all can do something again where you go into some groups in another session. Sure, Andrea can put something like that together. Just in the chat, any reflections, anybody want to any ahas, epiphanies that anybody would want to, put in the chat? And in the essence of time, I know sometimes it takes people a minute to get their thoughts together. So in the essence of time, I'm going to keep going, but I invite you to share in chat anything that resonated for you, but around that video. Just in summary, from my perspective, if we don't learn how to talk about it, so one of my books is We Can't Talk About That at Work, How to Talk About Race, Religion, Politics. And I wrote that back in 2015 because in the work that I was doing, I was recognizing that of all the topics, of all the diversity topics that we have, race, particularly as it related to Black African-American race, was the topic that was the most difficult to talk about. And I don't know, there are lots of reasons, probably because of our history, because of the pain that it causes. But I maintain that if we're not able to talk about it, we're not going to make progress. I maintain that if white people don't acknowledge their whiteness, we're not going to be able to make progress. And it's not acknowledging whiteness to be ashamed of it, to feel blamed, to feel, any kind of way where we're hearing some of the rhetoric about no kind of training in Florida that makes people feel uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable stuff. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It's been uncomfortable for Black people for centuries. It's uncomfortable. And so if we would come together recognizing that there's going to be discomfort, but there are ways to talk about it. And someone in the chat recognized, the idea of calling people in rather than calling people out, calling people in and saying, that's an interesting perspective. Can you share more about, why you believe that or where that came from, so that we're having a conversation. We're not blaming people for the societal situation. What happens so often in this work is that if you say the wrong thing, you get punished. And so this whole I'm not a believer in political correctness at all. Because I think that it's just that surface level. Just tell me what to say. And I have clients that just tell me what to say and tell me what not to say. That's not going to get you to the deep understanding of why. Why is it? Why shouldn't you wear blackface? What is the history of that? Why is that so painful? And so unless we just say don't do this, then do this, we're not going to make that progress. And it takes time. It takes effort. It takes the willingness to do that learning. And so for many adults who've already, done their schooling and whatnot, they, feel that they know enough and they don't want to go back. So we have to learn how to have those conversations, and the acknowledgement that race matters. Just acknowledging it, it matters. And if you're white, your race matters in a different way than Blacks. And so we don't have time, obviously, to go into deep. Some of the organizations that we're working with them on a monthly basis. Well, one organization, a large not-for-profit, we work with their senior leadership every other week for a year, 90 minutes. That's the kind, well, you all know, you don't matriculate at Harvard by taking one course or spending 2 hours, right? So it takes time, right? So there is something in the chat, I think. The notion of whiteness as the norm and everything that goes along with that, not recognizing their Blackness until they came to this country. Yes, absolutely. I hear that a lot. So people who come from other countries, who come from countries that are predominantly Black, don't, until they get to the United States, they said, oh, that's a thing, huh? And that's a thing that's going to make a difference. Yeah. Had a very rich conversation you want to continue. That's great. One thing that stood out most to me is the salience of racial identity among African American and white people, and how racial salience is much higher among African Americans. Right, exactly, because society sees us as Black before anything else. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So this is a deeper, it's a much deeper conversation. But identity, our identity matters, because that's what you see, and the assumptions that are made about that without anybody even knowing you, that's Black fatigue. That's Black fatigue. All right, so we're going to move on. Racism is a public health crisis, and some communities have actually declared it so. So my way of thinking about the impact of racism at this multi-level and intertwined way is to, say we have systemic racism that leads to intergenerational stress and trauma, that gets to race-based disparities in health, and then generations of oppressively inequitable life experiences and outcomes, and it just keeps going around and around and around. And so, the health issues that Black people have, people say, oh, it's because of diet, it's because of poverty and not having, nutritious food. Well, yeah, that can be a part of it. But scholars more and more, and scientists and researchers more and more, are attributing it to racism. So it's not race, but it is racism that creates the disparate outcomes. And so this study that showed experiencing discrimination early in life leads to chronic worrying and fear, causing significant wear and tear by increasing one's allostatic load. And then that's a lifelong buildup of stress. They have found that these experiences set in motion some physiological responses, elevated blood pressure, heart rate, production of biochemical reactions that eventually lead to disease and mortality. African Americans who reported more experiences with racial discrimination had increased feelings of helplessness. So when you think about how do we get to equity and socioeconomic equity, and if in fact people who have
we lost Mary Frances for a minute there. We'll give Zoom a second. Yeah, I think, Rachel, to answer your question, I think Mary Frances froze. We'll get her back. Thank you for all of your comments in the chat right now as we work with Zoom and any technical difficulties.
Are you all hearing me now? I do apologize.
Oh, yes, yay.
Okay, I am back.
All right.
And everybody is back, all right?
And they'll come back, and that will be, we still have 40 minutes left in the.
Can I ask a question in the meantime?
Yeah, sir, please.
May I ask a question in the meantime? I was wondering, I'm wondering if there's been any thought about having these series of conversations, not just with the authors, among students, with other folks across the country. I mean, I hear some things on the radio, and I'm like, we're not talking the same language, and I look forward to hearing from Mary Frances how to get past that. Get past that. I don't know, other than, you know, what do you worry about? Is it the price of milk, or is it dangerous to cross the street? Or, you know, what is it that worries the folks? And, you know, I just wondered.
Yeah, so complex, right? It's just really so difficult. I think there's just so much that people worry about these days, and there's so much, you know, there's just so much going on. I don't know, it's really hard to answer. But I think I think hearing someone else's perspective and hearing what someone else is worried about, you know, is just so important, right? Because oftentimes there's so many times when I think, wow, you know, that's not even something that would even be something that I would even think about. You know, I'm talking about my own privilege now, because privilege is not binary, right? Privilege is not, you either have it or you don't. You may have privilege in some aspects of your life, but you don't have privilege in other aspects of your life, right? And so some of the work that we do is around power and privilege, and where do you have privilege? So it's not that necessarily when people say, well, you know, I grew up poor, so how can you say that I'm privileged? Well, you know, if you're white, your race gives you that automatic, you know, you didn't ask for it, right? You know, privilege. So it's difficult. And I think just listening to the experiences that different people have one by one to really understand why somebody, you know, is more worried about the price of milk than, you know, than how racism is playing out. I don't know if that answers your question, Sarah.
Yes, it does. You know, I just feel sometimes that we're speaking from our own space as opposed to speaking from, you know, and I have lived all over the world and across the country, and I, you know, sometimes, yeah. And it just matters. It really matters sometimes when you worry that you don't have water.
Right. Exactly.
Or if you
Right.
have water, it's not safe to drink, you
Right.
know, or things like that. It sort of really changes your perspective on everything.
It does, right? And then we have to really look at the underlying systems. So why is it that you don't have water? You know, what is in that system? You know, I call it reverse engineering. Like, let's go back to, you know, where did that start? How did that happen? What systems are in place to keep that in that state, right? Yeah. I was watching something about people in, I think it was Mississippi, rural Mississippi, who don't have water. You know, and legislation that has been passed over the years to keep them from having clean water. You know, so that's why I think the system is so important, because individuals are experiencing a system, right, on a daily basis.
Be useful. It looks like we have Mary Frances back and all set up, and everyone is back in the main room now.
Okay,
Thank you, Mary
great.
Frances.
All right, thank you all for your patience. I really appreciate it. I'm not sure what happened, but we know that technology is technology, right? So y'all are hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to sum up now. So I hope, and again, continue to put into chat any epiphanies, any ahas, any revelations, or any comments that you wanted about your time in chat in the breakout. I'm so happy that you had more time, right? So it worked out. So what can we do? Owning our power requires us to affirm our truth. So Audre Lorde said, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. So when we say affirm, and we're going to give you, we're going to give you a resource around this at the end of the session. And for those who are personally impacted by racism, affirm your truths. And I see this happening more and more, and it's so important. Allow yourself time to grieve and process whatever might be going on. You might have to sit out. You might have to call in there's a little video kind of humorous. This is not humorous stuff, but the video is called Calling in Black. I just can't take it today because of everything that's going on. Find your community and lean into your village. So other people who perhaps, can support you in different ways. Focus on your sphere of influence. I think there's just so much going on in so many ways and places, but what is your sphere of influence if you are personally impacted by racism? I used to hear a little song called Brighten the Corner Where You Are. So what can you do in your own sphere of influence? Identify those self and communal care practices that work for you. And so again, self-care is so important, and even communal care, groups that are about healing and about just creating the space to be able to be. Rejecting those norms and systems that compromise the sense of self. And so the white dominant norms that would say, this is the way you must be, or this is the only right way. Really, finding what your way is and not necessarily adhering to those things that have been told in order to succeed. Like, what does professionalism look like? The requirement to assimilate into a culture. This is our culture and you have to assimilate. That culture may not be for you. And then lastly, meditate and practice mindfulness. And so we had an opportunity before we started today to do just a very, very brief meditation and to, have an opportunity to get to a place of inner peace. So for people who are personally impacted by racism, we say affirm. Affirm that you're worthy. Affirm that you're okay. And don't internalize, that internalized oppression, right? Don't internalize to say, this is not, there's something wrong with me. Ask what is wrong with this system. Affirming and rejecting dominant narratives might sound like being a Black or brown person is exhausting. No, racism is exhausting. White apathy in response to these systems is exhausting. Being Black is not exhausting. It is the system that is. It's my responsibility to educate my white colleagues and speak on behalf of my community, not change that narrative. It's my responsibility to prioritize my well-being and educate myself and community so that I can thrive in the systems. We can thrive. If I choose to speak or educate, that's my choice. So it's an invitation rather than expectation. Oftentimes we find that dominant group people have an expectation that Black people are going to be willing and want to talk about their experiences. That might not always be the case. The burden just may be too much. And so when you think about engaging people in your community, in your circle, Black people in your circle, make sure that you're asking, would you like to talk about this? Or may I ask you a question? There are plenty of resources, to get the answers, but don't assume that you can rely on your Black friends. Allowing Black people to set boundaries. I'll not engage in a debate to prove my experiences with racism. I don't have the capacity to teach you how I'm impacted. Say it's sexism and racism, but there are great online resources. What you said is not sitting well with me. I'd like to revisit this once I've processed it. Or this conversation is becoming exhausting and I'd like for us to change the subject, or I will respectfully disengage. So allowing that and not seeing that as something negative or something that's going to impact one's career. Recognize the burden and the heaviness of navigating and living in this, living in the waters that we swim in, the racist waters, the racialized world that we live in. And so if you are not a person of color, if you're not Black and you want to be an ally, what's your power? And we ask you to dare to be better. This moment isn't calling us to do something different. The universe is calling us to be something. And that's a whole different thing. Lucille Clifton. So for those not personally impacted and seeking to be allies, we say dare to do better. Decenter yourself and listen. Center the experiences of those most impacted. When people say something like, oh, something like that happened to me, that's not usually helpful. It may have been a similar experience, but it doesn't suggest that you're really listening and centering that person. Act in the face of inequity and exclusion. You heard in the video, the New York Times video where the woman said, yeah, I've seen racism, but I've not once said anything. When you say something though, again, calling people in, asking the question, gee, can you explain what you just said what was that about? Can you help me understand that a little bit more? Rather than saying, hey, that was racist. Let's first explore. Let's first, better understand. Reflect on your own identities, values, assumptions, and power. And so white is a thing. We didn't create it, because if there was no black, there would not be any white. If there was no white, there wouldn't be any black, right? And so you've got to be able to examine and understand the dynamic that's going on both sides. So owning if you want to be a good ally, you have to own your whiteness. And again, it's not about being ashamed of it or trying to blame. It's not, gee, I'm white. It's really about understanding those power dynamics. It's understanding the hierarchy, the racialized hierarchy in our society that you did not personally create, but you're living in it. And what is your responsibility? And then lastly, educate yourself, not putting that burden on your colleagues of color. Again, there's so many resources out there today for learning and for education. Reflect, where can I do better with the power that I have in my home, my family, my job, how I lead, my political power, how and where I spend my money, the media I consume and share, my own social media, my interactions with people. Where can you use your power to dismantle and disrupt racism? As a start, it might look like facing your fear and your fragility. I hear people often say, well, I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. Well, maybe even prefacing your comment with that, or your question, I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing, but I really would like to know. So again, it's coming from a genuine place of empathy, acknowledging your whiteness, as I've said, talking to your children in your life about race and disrupting this colorblind ideology in your family and personal circles. Reading again and reflecting, support causes that break down racist systems, voter suppression, unjust criminal systems. It's going to take us all. It's going to take everybody everybody who has a desire. And so I know you're here today because you have a desire. So when I say all, I mean all of us in this community that we're in right now together in order to break down these systems. And a lot of people say, well, I'm just one person. What can I do? Right? One person can do a lot. Do what you can do in your sphere of influence to be an anti-racist. That means taking action. That means disrupting. If you're in a meeting and you see that the conversation, that there are people who are not invited into that conversation, help that to happen. Those are the kinds of things on a daily basis. Notice, listen to what your colleagues might be saying or feeling. Be humble. When people talk about, well, I'm going to be an ally. I say it's an aspiring ally. You're an aspiring ally. You're not an ally yet. There's lots to learn. That's the humility. What more do I have, to learn in order to be an effective ally? And so, in summary, this is really, really hard work. I am so happy that you were here in community with me this morning. I recognize that some of you may not agree with everything that I brought forward or that I said, and that's okay. But I'd ask you to reflect on it. I'd ask you just to think about it. Why did that not sit well with me? What is it about my belief system that's so different? Perhaps what do I need to learn more? I thank you so much for this opportunity. Truly, truly an honor to be with you all today. And now we have time for questions and answers.
There's one question in the chat. How did the dog story turn out?
How did the dog story turn out? So the dog story turned out that I said to my assistant at the time, find my child a dog, because I'm not going to tell an 11-year-old that she cannot have a dog because she's Black. And so she had already named the dog, and we had bowls for the dog before. This was before that. And she had Snickers. She named the dog Snickers because the dog was brown and white. So she named the dog Snickers. Well, the dog we found was black and white, but still got the name Snickers. So anyway, she got her dog. Snickers lived a nice long life. And yeah, so that's how the dog story. And oh, no, but there was I did call the breeder. I called the breeder to find out, why. And this was before I knew it was because we were Black. I was like, wait a minute, this child has been wanting this dog. Now we can't have this dog. And so she just started to curse me out and to just, say very awful things, just because I wanted a dog. Black fatigue. There are no other questions?
Give everyone a minute.
Hey, Mary? Hi, Mary, it's
someone?
Melanie.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I just want to say you're from Rochester, right?
Yes, my adult life, yes. I'm from Niagara Falls originally, but my adult life was in Rochester, yes.
Okay, I'm also from Rochester.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'm going to get this photo to you. I'm a friend of Tina Chapman's.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I took a picture many years ago, and you're in DC, and your son is in the background of the picture.
Oh,
and Tina pointed that out to me. She said, I think that's Mary's son. And I said, really? But thank you for today. Thank you for today. This was very eye-opening, and it was just a great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I live in Charlotte now, by the way, so I'm no longer in Rochester.
Mary
Yes.
Frances, I would just like to thank you so much for presenting to us and allowing us the space to talk and to hear your wisdom, because I have been feeling so tired. And I didn't name it Black fatigue, but it's almost like I'm grinding to a halt at this point, because with the whole COVID thing, there's no distraction.
Yes.
There's no way to get away from myself.
Right. Yeah. Do you have people to talk to? You have friends?
Oh yeah, I've got friends.
I mean, I know you have friends, but to talk to about this, yeah.
Yes, I try to, how can I put this? When two white men threw rocks at me in my car on my way from the Attleboro train station home, I didn't tell my husband for 4 months because I was afraid that he would become so angry that he might do something rash, and I was not ready for him to go to jail. When the police came into our house on his 60th birthday 12 years ago, I didn't tell him until this year that they had come, one with a gun drawn. And the first thing that they asked me was, does the license plate blah, 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 blah belong to an owner here, belong to someone who lives here? And I said, yes, that's my car. They said, why is it parked in front of a vacant house? And I said, because you see that we're having a party. I wanted to give our guests enough room to park. And I said, is it illegal to do that? They said, no. And they kept looking beyond me and they kept standing there. I said, have we been too loud? And they said, no. And they still didn't move. And I said, well, there's plenty of food. You want me to get you a plate? That's when the officer lowered her gun. It took that. But I didn't want to tell Ken. I didn't want to tell our guests because the party was rip-roaring fun. So Ken's like, why didn't you tell me this 12 years ago? I'm like, it was your 60th birthday party. It was a milestone. Why would I ruin that? But it's like trying to hold things so that you pull them out at the right time is itself tiring.
Yeah, absolutely fatiguing. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing that story, because as I said, it's in our individual stories and understanding. And oftentimes it is hard for us to even share our stories. So is it Disney?
Desney.
Oh, Desney. See,
Desney.
I still got it wrong. Even though you've spelled it out, Desney. Yeah, I just appreciate.
No,
you
my
sharing.
cousin called me Dees, but it's Desney.
Okay. All right.
We do have a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I see. Yeah. What can an institution do to address these issues, policies, and practices. So it's an interrogation of those policies and practices and looking at where they came from and asking the question, who is harmed by these policies? Who is helped by these policies? And I know we're going to run out of time, but really quickly, procurement policies. And so a lot of companies say, we're going to hire Black-owned companies. We're going to hire more of them. That's what we're going to do, you know, to break down and to show that we're anti-racist. So the procurement department says, okay, we're going to move our payment schedule from 30, 60, 90 to 120 days. We're going to pay you in 120 days. So this is separate from the people who are saying we want to use Black-owned business. So hire a Black-owned business, play the Black-owned business in 120 days, rather than like 30 days net. Who does that harm? It harms the Black-owned business because they're usually small. They can't carry the cash. You know, they don't have the cash flow. Who does it help? It helps the institution because it helps their cash flow. So that's just an example of a policy that one might say, well, what does procurement have to do with this? Because we often think of this work as HR work, hire more people, right? But when you dig into all sorts of policies that can have a detrimental impact on, you know, the very work that you say that you're trying to do. So it's understanding, yes, and having everybody to have that sense. So that's one thing. What should leaders be doing? Leaders should be continuing to ask that question. Are we being inclusive? Are we taking into account the differences that we have on the team? They should be always wanting to gather more information, qualitative information, quantitative information, so that they can see where the disparities are. I'll just take one, you know, pay equity. So pay equity shouldn't even be a thing anywhere because it's very tangible. You can look and see who's paid what. And when you see that disproportionately Black people or women or whatever group it is are paid less, fix it. That's what y'all can do. Leaders, fix it. You have the power. Use your power to change systems. Fix it. You can do that. I don't understand why we have pay inequity. I just don't understand. Anyway, so critical race theory. Okay, so I wrote something in we do a blog called The Inclusion Solution. I see some of my folks are on. Thank you, Winters Group team, for being on today too. Somebody can put in the chat the link to our blog. It's free. I'm not selling anything. But I wrote, you know, the 10 truths about critical race theory. It's a matter that people just don't understand what it is. When Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term back in the 70s, it was to look at, from a legal lens, it was to look at why aren't we making more progress, because we have all these laws in place and we're not making progress. So she got a bunch of legal people together to take a look, and they called it critical race theory, which is this very academic term. It is not being taught in Virginia schools, you know. So it is not being taught.
Through 12.
It's not being taught, right? So, you know, when people are asked by the media, so you don't like critical race theory? No, I don't like critical race theory. It's a bad thing. Would you know what it is? Oh, not really, but it's a bad thing. You don't even know what it is. So the idea is that we need to advocate for the truth being told, not revisionist history, but history. The reason that Nicole Hannah Jones was, story about Nicole Hannah Jones, probably. But my point is that there's a large group of people, right, about 40 to 45% of the US population, that do not want to hear the truth about the history. It was not told accurately it is not told accurately. It wasn't, and it is not told accurately in textbooks. And so the scholars and the activists are telling the true history, and people do not want to hear it. And so critical race theory, the term, and this is what we do, we demonize terms. And that's the critical race theory, just demonize the term that people have latched on to as some horrible thing, and they don't even know what it is.
We probably can do one more question.
One more question, okay. Is that the one in the chat?
Let's see, we have a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
How would the coaching question? How
The
would
coaching
you
question? Okay.
coach those of us who must apply policy equally while being mindful of Black fatigue and how that may impact the work of colleagues?
Do you have to apply policy equally, or can you do it equitably? Because there's a difference. And I'm asking a sincere question. I just don't know. This question comes from Annie.
It's an anonymous question, so
Oh, it's an
comes from
anonymous
program.
question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Annie's on our programs team, so it's anonymous.
So I would say that we shouldn't be applying policy equally. We should be applying it equitably, which is tricky. It's harder to do. That would be my answer to that. If there's any clarification, if I'm missing a point here, Andrea, help me. Am I missing something?
No, I think you've answered it. I think it goes back to that slide that we've all seen with the 3 scenarios,
Right.
and figuring out where we are on that spectrum.
Right.
Because the goal is getting to equitable
Right.
and equal, and understanding that equal doesn't always mean the same.
Right.
Equitable doesn't mean the same.
Correct. Yeah.
And so I think it's that notion, and perhaps that's something we could have a conversation about. We can set up a Zoom and we can talk about that and have some breakouts. So thank you so much for that. And we have other questions in the chat, and what we'll do is we'll try to get them to Mary Frances. And so I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Mary Frances. What a terrific time spent together. And even the accident of losing you for a little bit was a good accident for some of us in our breakout groups, because, especially during this COVID time of being away from each other and feeling isolated, even a breakout session in Zoom is a welcome time to spend with other people and to talk about important things. And I'd encourage HR and the rest of us to continue to find ways to get us all together. But thank you so much. Thank you for your book and for introducing this and bringing this topic to us today and leading us in this discussion. And we all can commit to continuing the discussion afterwards. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And if I could add that that last question, I feel a little on the spot because we are talking about policy. And maybe just to borrow from Mary Frances, one of the first things we ought to do is interrogate those policies.
Mm-hmm.
If we have policies written down that don't allow us to be equitable, that the application of those policies, by the way they're written, is inequitable, we ought to take a look at the policies. We can do this work together, I think.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Mary Frances. So I think as we look to round out the time together here today, I do want to first make a plug for building the community. As I said, we have been apart for so long. I've never been together in person with most of you all, having been here now just 6 months. But as we all return to campus life over the next months and following COVID, let's be deliberate about that together and work in our units and in our departments. And I will also make a plug for Dean Gay has put some money on the table for this work, the community fund that each of your units can apply for to pull folks together. And let's be deliberate and continue this conversation and many others as part of that, building our community work. Next up, I am pleased to introduce to you all our new Associate Dean for Human Resources, Dr. Tiffany Jadot. Tiffany, are you here? I don't see you on the screen, but I assume you made it.
I am here.
Here you are. All right. Tiffany joined us just this past Monday. So welcome to your, what are we on your 4th day here now?
Day 4, yep.
4th day. Tiffany comes to us from Boston Medical Center. where she served BMC and its 9,000 employees as Senior Director of Organizational Development and Effectiveness. In that role, she led organizational development, diversity, equity, inclusion, talent management, talent recruitment. It's just so many things that resonate with us that we want to do a great job with in the FAS. And so, so important, and so glad to have you with us. She was a success at BMC. She expanded diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, launched a coaching and networking program aimed at supporting the career development of emerging professionals of color. She partnered with an external female-owned and operated leadership development organization to provide professional development and mentorship to more than 100 female leaders across the system. Before that, Tiffany was Vice President of HR at the Dimick Center, which, I was in government previously and am familiar with Dimick as a leader in the greater Boston area, a nonprofit community health and human services agency that really takes care of so many Bostonians. I'm so glad to have a person here with such great professional credentials and commitment to doing good in our community. Tiffany also was a member of the Governor Baker's Massachusetts Healthcare Collaborative, so she's a leader at the state level as well. She is a lifelong resident of the South Coast of Massachusetts, has her undergrad degree in human resources and an MBA from UMass Dartmouth, and a doctorate in education and from Northeastern University. So that's when we have someone who is so well credentialed, it takes me a lot of breaths to get through the introduction. I am going to pause now and just tell you all that I am so glad Tiffany is here with us and look forward to working with her in the coming weeks and months and years. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you, Scott, so much. Mary Frances, again, it's a pleasure, to hear your work. Again, very familiar with your work and incorporating that in my practice as well. And I'm really excited to be, again, day 4, working with these esteemed level of professionals and folks that I've met so far. Being part of the Harvard community is really humbling. And, really briefly, my motivation in the DEI space, as we're calling it at Harvard, DIB, it really is just a commitment to my values and leadership of really just supporting the holistic person, right? So, brown, black, white, whatever you are, there's a serving need that everyone has, right? You look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and there's a lot to be said. We are people, right? First and foremost. And there are levels that need to be satisfied. And I think what drew me to human resources early on was really being able to best support those needs. I was really fortunate to join the Dimick Center. They are an institution, really it's a history of Roxbury. And I did not know of the Dimick Center until I arrived at my interview. I'm from the South Coast of Massachusetts, and anyone who's from Massachusetts, there's an unofficial line of demarcation. If you're south of 128, you have no clue what's going on north and west. And if you are north, you have no idea what goes on south. It could be a whole nother territory. So until I researched the Dimick Center, and I met with, at the time, Dr. Maisha Minter-Jordan, really a prolific leader in the healthcare space. She gave me a lot of history in terms of the history and the responsibility of being a leader of color for these mission-oriented organizations. And in really being able to understand the needs of people and just getting into the vulnerabilities of that. So Desney, I put in the chat, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences. It's really important. This is very uncomfortable work, but it's important work. And it really starts with conversations, and it's important to have these types of conversations. During the time of the murder of Mr. Floyd, of George Floyd, I was on maternity leave. we were blessed to have our second child. We had a little boy. And although it was an amazing moment, although we were in the midst of a pandemic, I had started recently at Boston Medical Center. So my anxiety was already up. And then, you know, I was watching what happened with Mr. Floyd, and I immediately went into panic. It wasn't fatigue, it was panic, it was anxiety, it was actually depression too. And some of it may have been postpartum depression, but it was a level of, we have a 10-year-old daughter, she was 8 at the time, and I grew really concerned about the ability to, number one, protect our children. My husband immigrated from Haiti when he was 13, and we talk a lot about perspectives, and there's a different experience when you come from other countries, and we share a lot of the experiences, and I like to pick his brain because, you know, I take it for granted sometimes that all Black experience is the same. He politely reminds me that's not the case. But at the time I had said, you know what, this is heavy. This is a lot. I'm probably a pretty well-mannered, calm person, but this is a lot for me. And I don't have to go anywhere right now. We were kind of in lockdown in our own cocoon, in our own community. And it was really a sense of, okay, there's a call to action of what I can actually do. So when I returned from maternity leave and I returned to Boston Medical Center, what's my charge going to be? What's my purpose going to be in terms of not feeling helpless, but feeling a sense of empowerment? How can I empower our employees that at the time I was still connected, and folks were feeling disempowered. They were feeling that same level of weight and concern and wanting to know what to do. So, you know, when I returned from leave, the big focus for me was, let's make sure we have an outlet for folks, a psychological support, a system of support for Black, Brown, everyone. It doesn't just have to be our minorities, but it has to be a holistic framework that people feel supported. You know, I shared with Andrea and Scott the other day, Seen, Heard, Celebrated, but as part of that with HR, it's attracted and retained to anchor those thoughts, right? So I am extremely humbled to be part of this community and to work with all of you in terms of driving a culture change and really accelerating that. You know, Harvard is really built on the founder of Black History Month, and it really is exciting to be, you know, talking about this now, where, you know, the second doctor who achieved a doctorate from Harvard, Dr. Woodson, is the founder of Black History Month, and really underscored the importance of change and driving change. You know, unfortunately, we have a long way to go, right? You know, early 1900s is when Dr. Woodson had really recognized Black History Month. And although we have made progress, it takes a community to continue to forge change and to invite others into the conversation and call in folks versus calling out. So, you know, I'm excited to be here and committing to that pledge to invite others into the conversation so that, you know, innovation and change management can really take place. Now, I will say it is a messy, uncomfortable space that requires vulnerability and trust. And I, you know, feel that strongly that there's strength in numbers and there's strength in community. So really, really looking forward to continuing these types of conversations, and Andrea and team, Annie, you know, really excited that these types of conversations are happening and that they'll continue to happen.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tiffany. And am I still muted? No. Thank you so much, Tiffany, and welcome again to Harvard and to FAS. Thank you to all of you who attended today. Thank you to Scott for being here in such a substantive way as well. And to the programs team, we have one of the best programs teams, I think, in the university. So thank you so much for all you did to support this. To the diversity HR team, Attain Smith, Lydia Alvida, Megan Wong, Chris Keller. Thank you so much for everything you did. Now, save the date, April 10th is our next dialogue. and it will be, the focus will be on Asian American Pacific Islander community. May 10th, save the date. And there is a QR code on the previous slide. That's a survey. We hope you will fill out the survey because we really do take your feedback seriously. It helps us to fashion the topics, etc. So please fill out the survey and you will receive the handouts that Mary Frances mentioned when we send out the post-session mailing. Mary Frances, amazing. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. The book is Black Fatigue: How Racism Erodes the Mind, the Body, and the Spirit. You can get it on Amazon. It's just an amazing book, and I hope you all will get it. And we look forward to continued conversations with all of you. Many of you have said you want to have some conversations. Reach out to me, let me know, and we'll do our best to meet that need. Everyone have a great rest of the week. Stay safe and happy Black History Month. But remember too, Black history is American history.
Thank you, everyone.
All righty, bye-bye.